Today we're going to attempt a CPU swap on a Samsung A71 5G that has been smashed real bad. And what we're going to do is transplant the CPU and memory from this smashed motherboard to a working motherboard so we can recover data. Hi, I'm Jesse from VCC Board Repairs. Thanks a lot for joining us here on the channel. Smash that like button if you'd like to see CPU swap videos. Subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this. And share this video with all your friends. Also, don't forget to check out the video description down below because I'll link to all the tools I used today in this tutorial, as well as the t-shirt that I'm wearing today about data recovery. So let's go ahead and get started with this video. Alright, so this first inspects what we are dealing with, which is an A71. As you can see, there's a big impact here. You can't really see too much damage on the back, but the motherboard is pretty bad. So I've already taken off the shields to do a visual inspection, and this is where the motherboard is just messed up. You can see if it focuses, you'll be able to see right here it's all bent really bad, and it also broke a bunch of components here. Also the connectors destroyed. So at this point it looks like the board is beyond repair. So what we're going to do is swap over the CPU, which is this one, the memory, which is this one, onto a working motherboard. So I bought another working A71, which I labeled with the green dot here to indicate this is my working board. It's fully functional. I took the board out and we're gonna attempt the swap. Now, some important tools that we need is a stencil. So if you look up the part number on here, it is a Qualcomm SM7250. So there's going to be a stencil here called SM7250. So this one's for the CPU, and then the memory, I don't know if it says on here, but on ZXW we could actually see that there's actually a board view for this model, and if you zoom in on the memory, you can kind of see the pattern here. And if you look at my other stencil here, it matches with this pattern, a BGA 134. These are Lee Bumblebee stencils. I actually got these at Wholesale Gadget Parts, WGP.com. Use promo code VCCBR to get 5% off your first order. And these are the QS14 and QS73 stencils. So another thing I do want to point out about this job is the CPU on this one is a single layer. So on iPhones it's usually double layer where it's the CPU and then the RAM on top. These appear to be single layer. So it makes it a lot easier for attempting the swap. And this is actually my first one I'll be trying for a Samsung board. So let's look at this under the microscope so you guys can get a better look. So here off on the side you can see the memory. This is called UFS or eMMC. It doesn't look heavily underfilled, so it should be easy to remove. And the CPU does look underfilled, although that shouldn't be an issue. So I hold this off the edge of my bench. You can see the underfill right here. Although it looks pretty soft, so that's good. But this one, you don't see anything. I think you can see some here off to the side. So this one will be easy to remove. This one's going to be a little tougher, but let's go ahead and just try it anyway. And it looks like if I get this one out, it'll give me room to come in on this side of the CPU to insert my tool and be able to lift it. But yeah, look at the motherboard. This coil is destroyed. I think that's already missing. This cap was bad, but problem is I could try to just repair the broken components. The thing is, this is really concerning. It should not be curved like that. You see it sideways. So there could be a lot of damage within the traces, and if I try to repair this by pulling parts from a working board, I could just end up having a non-working board, and then we have to do the swap anyway. So we might as well jump to doing the swap. You can see how the connector is warped. And yeah, it's not good. Not a good sign. Yeah, you can actually see right here, there's actual broken board. So basically my efforts could be futile if I just try to repair the broken components. Also, there's always a chance that the CPU or the memory got damaged. Although physically I don't see any cracks, so this should be good. And for Samsungs, these are the only two chips we need. Whereas iPhone, you need NFC, you need EEPROM to do this. So it does make it a little easier. All right, so there you go. And then this is my working board, which is fully functional. You see how this is clean and flat. And then everything's under a shield, so we need to get under that, take off this CPU, and then prep the area so we can then do the next part. So actually, let me remove these cameras. This one as well. We don't need this. We don't need working cameras for data recovery. We just get rid of them. Okay, so CPU is over here. Let me get my board holder. What I'm gonna do is actually line it up here on the board holder so it's grabbing the board real steady. And first, let's peel off the sticker. I'm gonna use 365 Celsius to heat up the sticker, and hopefully it comes right off. Now let me go under here. The goal is to lift up the sticker in one piece. That way it doesn't leave behind a bunch of adhesive. So we don't need this. All right, so here's the tricky part. We got to remove this shield without damaging the board. So what I'm gonna do is first add some low melt all along the edges. Since I just heated up the board, the flux is super easy to spread. And also what we're gonna do here is use this board as essentially kind of like a practice board to kind of get a feeling of removing the CPU. So this CPU, we can be rough with it, damage it, and it's fine because it's not the important CPU. It's just the donor CPU. So we're gonna use this to get a feel and gauge, you know, how much pressure we need to apply to lift the CPU. Right now, I'm running my iron. This is the micro pencil K tip, I think it's called. Has like a flat angled side. And then I'm trying to rub this low melt all along the base of this shield so that when I heat it with hot air, it lifts up super easy. So I don't know if you guys can see. You can see when the solder bridges with the base. There's like a line that kind of disappears. So see this shiny line here at the bottom? I run my iron. Add some solder, and now that line disappears because it's coated in this low melt solder. That's kind of the goal here. And it does get tricky in some spots just because there's like no space for the iron to go to. So it might rub on surrounding components, so be careful with that. That connector doesn't matter for data recovery. We just need the device to boot up, connect to a PC, have touch, and not restart or anything. So that's actually a pretty common issue that for data recovery, where you fix a phone but it restarts randomly, or like there's no touch, or you know, random issues like that that would prevent you from accessing data. So the goal here is to get, you know, just certain functions for data, and those would be touch, USB connection to a PC, you know, and it's stable, it doesn't shut off. All right, so now I'm gonna go 400 and 120 air Celsius, 400 Celsius, 120 air. And you know what? Before I do this, let me compare my donor board. Where can I insert my tool? Because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna insert my blade to try to lift it up. But I do want to do it where there's the least chance of hitting a component. So maybe I'll go in here and kind of lift up. Let's try that. So just heat around the perimeter. All right, let me use this other tool. If I use my hook tool, it kind of gives me better angles too. And the not the nice thing, but kind of one thing that happens is once it kind of lifts up in one spot, it becomes real weak on the rest of the shield, and it lifts up super easy. So I can already see it lifting up on this side. Essentially, kind of this corner here is lifted up, so you can actually be a little more, oops, a little more rough on that corner, which makes it lift on the rest of the shield. Here it comes. So right now I'm lifting up this pretty hard. And I use high airflow on these just because the shield is so you know, heavy as far as thermal mass, that it needs more power to kind of melt the solder. Now here it comes, almost there. I'm heating the bottom, heating the back, the top. All right, let me adjust this a little bit. Oh, look at that. It's off. All right, cool. So there's a little too much solder there for my liking. Let me see if I could kind of just flow it out of place, out of the way. This is one of the downsides to doing this, is that you'll get blobs of solder like this. So you gotta keep an eye out for that. You don't want to bridge the ground perimeter to a component, because then you'll have a short. So if you just kind of run your iron real fast. All right, I got some solder on there, but it's not making contact. I think we should be good. Oh, look at that. There's some right here. So let me first clean this up, and then compare to my donor board and see if that's supposed to be like that. Yeah, so that by, you know, at the factory there's a missing component there which matches with that, so we're good. All right, so this is my donor board, so we can scratch these out. These are not customer data, so we don't care about these. I'm just doing this so we don't mix them up. So the goal here is to remove this one. Once we remove this, then we have room to access this one. So I don't want to, there's like no room to come in on this side, so might as well come in on this side. So let me heat the board a little bit so I can spread the flux. Go go on this side as well. And this side. Alright. So now I am going to try this tool. This is a two-ule tool from Union Repair tool. I'm gonna start off at 365 and 65 air. That's usually my standard temperature. And if I feel like I'm on here for too long and it's still not making any progress as far as lifting, then I will switch to a higher temp. Okay, I can see my tool making its way in, but still a lot of resistance. I do want to be careful not to damage. Like I said, this is kind of like my practice run. So I'm acting as if, you know, this is important, but it's just more to get a feel for the removal. Alright, so I have my tool inside. I can see the chip kind of moving when I twist the blade up, but it's not enough to... So here, let me go up to 380 and 75 air. Just a little, just kind of bump it up a little bit, see if make a better progress. Can you guys see how my tool like doesn't want to go in as easy? Alright, so I'm going to apply upward pressure and just heat up the chip, see if it wants to come off. Also gotta be careful with the surrounding components, I don't want to knock them out. Luckily, my donor board has replacements in case I do lose something. Alright, so I'm just still trying to enter. I'm not having any luck. So now let's go to my final, hopefully final temperature, 400 Celsius and 80 air. This is usually what I use for NAND removals on iPhones. So let's see if this does the same on here. And I can't tell if it's moving up when I twist the blade. I also don't see... I don't see the surrounding components get melting. I do see it kind of moving, but maybe I need to go a little bit higher on my... Let me try 95 air. It just needs a little more force. Let me see if I hit it from the side. Maybe like the air will go underneath the chip and help. Look at that, I can actually see the chip lifting now. I feel it going up. Alright, here we go. Tool is alright. Keep going. I don't know if there's a bunch of damage going on underneath. And we got it off. Alright, let's see how things look. I do see some missing pads, although they might be unnecessary. Alright, so let's look at ZXW to see. So we have let me turn on my polarizer light. Look at that, we can see the pads. So 1, 2, so these corner 3, and then there's 3 over here, and the rest look normal. If we go to ZXW, we can see, yeah, these are all NC. So the blue pads are called NC. These are pads that are not necessary. They're essentially kind of like decorative, or just there for, I don't know. But I got the chip off. Let's prep these pads. Actually, while the board is still hot, let's move on to the CPU. So I'm going to go back down to about 270. And I'm gonna clear the underfill around the CPU. Also, I'm gonna mark. So there's a dot here. So I'm gonna mark a little X over here. But this one I don't really need to mark because you can see the pattern. Although maybe I'll do it anyway. I could look at my donor. But let's clear out the underfill along the edges. I'm using a number 11 scalpel blade. Being real gentle. Don't want to damage the board. And then on this side, there's not much on the board on the side, so I think we're good here. And let's get this off, just since we already have, the board's already hot. If I try to do anything else right now, it'll cool down. So let me do the same setting, 495. And see, now that I have this chip off, I could easily enter here on the side. So I'm gonna keep heating it, and then let's check ZXW. All right, so there's a lot of pads here that can get damaged. I suppose I could just try to go in here and hope for the best. But hopefully not. This is still the donor board, so it doesn't matter if I do damage anything. But I'm just kind of slice here on the side to clear out some of that rubber underfill stuff. And I just push in and kind of get a feel for the resistance. No, if it's really hard to insert the tool, then I know it's maybe not hot enough to go in. Look at that. coming to temperature because the tool is sliding in a lot further. Alright, so looks like this corner is very easy to come into. Now I'm going to twist the blade. Trying to lift up the chip. It's not working. Let me try this corner. Right. Alright, that wasn't too bad. Let's see if we damage the CPU. I can't see any damage, but not until I kind of clean it will I see that. I think it's good. Oh, there is this component here that's missing. I wonder if this is needed. Alright, so I don't know what this is, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna save it so I could reuse it. And I'm gonna do that by, I have a coin here. I'm just gonna put it down here, put it under the coin. It's right here, so it doesn't get lost. Let's go back. So this is the donor CPU, so let's get that out of the way. Now, let's clean up some pads. So add some flux. Once we clean up the pads, we'll be able to better see the area. I'm going to activate my polarizer. And yeah, I don't see any rip pads. Well, I do see one right here. Although, let me check ZXW. It appears to be NC. So yeah, it's this one right here. So besides that one, looks like we're still on track to be good. So I'm gonna use low melt here to prep the pads. That way when I'm go to clean some of this underfill, it comes off. The solder on the board doesn't, it's easier for the solder to break off versus ripping pads. So if we just do this, and then I'll clean it off after. So just kind of run your iron over all the pads. Let me do it this way so you guys can you can actually see a little better with this polarizer light. You don't get any glare. By the way, I'll link this light in the description. So right below the video, there's a video description with all the tools I'll be using today. I see some more missing pads, although pretty sure those are also NC. All right. Okay. So let's try to clean off this wick. Clean off the solder using wick. And let me get a fresh piece of wick here. I'm gonna use 365. You can look at the upper right corner of my video to see the temperatures. Essentially, I'm using some inverted tweezers, the Art of Repair tweezers. To hold the wick. And the wick is kind of also partially cleaning off the underfill too. Move in a little closer. I don't like to use my iron yet, just because that I would just risk ripping pads. If I do it like this, it'll be a lot safer. For the board. Right, the wick is kind of all beat up now. Let me cut off the end so we have a fresh piece of wick. All right. Also want to be careful not to bump any components loose. Because then if I lose them, it's gonna just create more work for me. So the wick itself is pushing the underfill out as well. I think I got most of it. Now let me do this other side too. All right, so all right. Now let's try to manually clean off the rest of the underfill. So I'm gonna actually go lower in heats just because no need to be higher in heats. Just kind of using my tweezers, which are not sharp. They are pointy but not sharp. They're kind of dull at the end. I can kind of just gently push the underfill around and it just comes right off. Just go in between the pads and kind of push The goal is to kind of just push it loose, so then you come at the end and kind of clean off the rest over here as well along the edge. Okay. Let's clean off some of this other underfill, these empty parts of the board. Essentially, you're cleaning out the underfill so that the chip can sit flat and no obstructions. Alright. I think I got most of it, so now I'm going to try to scrub it clean and kind of get a better look at the board. I'm using alcohol, 99% isopropyl alcohol. This doesn't damage the board. Now I'm going to clean off the board pretty good. Let me get my little cleaning swab thing to absorb some of the alcohol and see what's left behind. We also check for any rip pads, see if we need to rebuild any traces or vias. Alright, so let me then finish it off with blowing away the flux in the underfill. Alright, so I still see a lot of underfill. Some pads did not get prepped. Alright, so here's the issue, an area of concern. So let's check it out on DXW. So if you look at the bottom left, we can see basically these pads here in the middle that are messed up. So I think we're fine. And then that other one is NC. So yeah, I think we're still good. And there's like a little trace here that's kind of questionable. And it's just the trace is exposed, but it should be fine. Right here. Kind of weird, it goes to nowhere. Oh, it's a ground pad. I don't know if you guys can see that. Alright, so I think we're good. We're in a good spot so far. Alright, so let me clean off the rest of the underfill. Might have to prep the pads and wick them one more time. Maybe. Or I might just wick. I'm still debating. So, but I mean, as of right now, it's pretty promising. There's no major screw ups. So we should be able to do this successfully. The hard part is going to come when we have to prep the customer CPU. Right, another NC pad flew away, so that's fine. Alright, let's see. Actually, let me continue on to this side. That way the heat is still present and it makes this easier. Well, it's still hot. We don't want to let it cool and then heat up again. We'll just do it all at once. You see how I'm like gently just rubbing the tweezer on the surface of the board without scratching it. Basically what you want to do. It's enough to push it, physically push it, and that should loosen it when you're applying heat. Alright, I think that's most of it on this side. Some more flux. All right, let me put my other solder wire. This is 183. It makes it easy to prep those pads. It has rosin in the solder wire, so there's no flux. The rosin helps flow the solder onto the pads. So we're gonna just keep adding solder. On every single pad. I'm gonna make sure every pad has some solder that I added because that makes it easier to wick away. Usually the factory solder, it'll be higher temp and a lot harder to wick. All right, so that side is done. Let me do this side as well. And then this side. And this side. There's nothing wrong with rotating the board to get better angles. So that's what I'm doing. All right. So now let me wick it again. All right, so this time we should be able to wick all the pads a lot easier. I'm gonna use hot air 365. And the goal is to just rub the wick on each pad and it should pick it up. And you can see I'm heating the wick, not the board necessarily. That makes it so it picks up the solder. Okay. Look at that. That's what we want. Super shiny pads. And let's go on to the next part of the board. you gotta be careful when you get close to components because it's super easy to knock them loose. So up here on the, well, here on the left side, a lot of components. Rotate the board to get better vantage point, I guess you can call it. And just keep brushing away the wick. I mean the solder with your wick. Alright, so my wick is kind of frayed and it's kind of getting a little harder to control. So you clip off the end so you have a fresh piece of braid, which makes it easier to pick up the solder. Alright. That's good, I think. All right. Let's clean this off one more time. You want it super clean because any debris can get in the way and just ruin the install. Like sometimes, even though it's clean, you somehow end up with a little speck of underfill that's underneath the chip, and then when you place it, it won't sit flat. Alright, so the goal is to clean up the surface so there's no debris, nothing on the board. Otherwise, you'll end up with a problem when you try to place the IC. So there's nothing there. So like right here, there's some flux here, right here. So we gotta clean that off. So just agitate it with some alcohol and a toothbrush. Otherwise, it'll stay stuck and it won't move. So I'm basically kind of spraying from one angle. And just blow the alcohol away so that it doesn't get on the board. You know what? Let me get a little towel here to absorb a lot of this flux. So alcohol on the board is fine because it evaporates really easy. It's really the flux that we want to get off the board, because the flux doesn't evaporate, and well, not at room temperature. So now you can see it's clean. All right, so I would say this board is prepped, good to go. Let me check the donor board, see if any missing components. Basically, I'm just comparing donor to mine, to the customer's board. I mean, everything seems there. So let's go with it. We're this is prepped, ready to go. Next is the customer's board. It turns out both chips have to point at this corner, so I guess we'll just leave it like that. Alright, so same thing here. Let me add some flux. So this one we can destroy technically, just because it doesn't matter. We're gonna get the important chips off the board. So I'm gonna go back to 400 and let me do 100 air. Hit the flux. to make contact with the side of the chip so it starts flowing inside. And we're gonna basically do the same thing. So this is a good strategy, coming in from the side. We'll probably just heat it for a bit to soften everything up. Also, I have my hot air real close to the chip so we transfer maximum heats. I'm trying to heat the tool as well. I think it might need a little higher temp. Look, I went all the way through. We're gonna get the other side of the chip hot so it can lift up. There it goes. Alright, cool. I don't see any obvious rip pads on the chip. It's on the board, so this is good. I'm gonna put it off here on my other working mat as my designated spot. Now I'm gonna clean the underfill on the edge here. So I'm using my hot air but really far away. That way I can just quickly clean this off. Essentially, when you do this, you're kind of separating the chip from the board and that it has nothing else to grab onto. This is very minimal, so it doesn't have to be that thorough. Alright, so same thing here. This is an important one. I'm gonna go up 410 just so I can get a little more melting action on the solder. So yeah, it was the corner where I was able to insert the tool. I'm gonna go to this corner. I'm also heating the tool. Right, being real gentle. I don't want to rip any pads. Also don't want to bend the chip too much and potentially damage it. There it goes. Okay, so that looks good, I hope. I'm gonna release the board. Next, we're gonna prep the ICs. So I'm gonna get the board out of the way. I'm gonna use this part of the jig here to prep it. So one trick I've seen online, specifically I've seen Ben P from Rescue in Germany do this, is put some low melt paste on the chip, on the CPU. So like this. And essentially the paste, you heat the paste so it fills in all the pads with the low melt, and it's easier to clean the underfill after. So this is the risky part, because if you damage the CPU in this step, then it's game over. All right, let's try that. I'm just gonna use my 330 temp. All right, let me go over my iron. All right, let me turn down my temp to 75. Now that I think of it, the technique was to put this on a preheater and let the solder balls melt that way, but I didn't do that. I used hot air, so I don't know if that's going to affect the results. Also, you got to be careful not to scratch the surface of the CPU. Then you could be causing problems with the different pads. I'm trying to be real gentle here. I'm gonna clean this up a little bit so we can see where we are. A real thick layer of underfill right here. Let me see if I could clean it up. My tweezers. Oh look, that cap looking thing here is missing. I think it went flying after running my iron over it. Okay. It's a good thing I saved the other one. I don't know if it's required for the CPU to work. So I'm just going over my tweezers real gently over all the pads. You can see some of the pads are molten, which is good because if the solder is molten, then it won't rip a pad when you're running your tool over it. Which is really the trick here, cleaning the CPU without damaging pads. All right, so what I'm gonna try now is some hot air wick. See if I could clean up some more that way. Trying to pick up some bigger chunks of underfill. And you need to have a lot of flux when doing the hot air wicking. Essentially scrubbing the top pad with the wick is like, it's kind of like a Brillo pad, and that it scratches off any gunk that's stuck on there, but doesn't scratch the surface of the thing you're scrubbing. Alright, so but yeah, so far so good. I don't see any rip pads, any damage to the surface of the CPU as of yet, so that's good. Alright, so let me clean this one more time and see where we are. Let me go back down to 270-ish and clean off some more underfill. Oh, this cap is there. Look at that. Didn't get lost. Essentially, I'm going in between the pads to scratch off the rest of the underfill. Not scratch, but kind of break off, loosen, which makes it part of the removing process, I guess. Alright, so a lot of it's gone. Let me add some more flux. And then prep it one more time. So I'm going to use my 183 solder, just because it has the rosin. And it's not picking up, not really picking it up. Don't know why, but the hot iron does also clean off some underfill in the process. I'm just kind of gently rubbing the surface of the chip to hopefully scrape away that underfill. All right. Well, it's still hot. Let me clean it. And it's hot is when it's easier to clean. As you can see here. Okay. Alright, we're getting there. Alright, still at 270. So now I'm just going to look for the bigger chunks. I mean, it's pretty much gone. I wonder if I could just reball it like this. I'm not seeing any major stuff here on the sides, but that doesn't really matter. You know what? Let me add some more pastes. There's a lot of oxidized pads as well. Basically pads that are kind of have like a layer of burnt stuff. I don't know how to describe it, but it's oxidized, so the solder is not grabbing because it's being blocked by that layer of soot, I guess you can think of it. So let me see, run my iron. Let it heat up. Okay, make it a little more. Okay, yeah, now it's grabbing a lot more of the pads, and we don't need all the pads to be prepped. As long as there's enough there so that when we rub the wick, it is kind of also, let's do 320. I don't want to keep adding too much heat. So if we do this, we should be able to get this ready for a reball. Alright, snip off the end of the wick. Let me rotate this. Let's go on this angle. Just like before, just kind of brush the surface. I should pick up the solder. All right, let's clean this off one more time. Check what we're left with. Still some underfill. There seems to be a real thin layer. And I'm not even using any heat because it seems to be a real thin layer, so it comes off just by pushing it. Also, there's like one oxidized pad here. So this is what an oxidized pad looks like. So you see how I kind of scratched the middle, so I made like a little J, but it has like this soot around it. So use a tool, you can then scrape it away. Now it's good. So let's see. There's like a solder ball here on the side. It's annoying me. There's a little more. I wish there was a brush that is soft but hot, so you can just kind of scrub all this off without damaging the surface of the chip. So if someone knows how to make that, go for it and let me know. I'll be the first to try it. It has to be soft enough where it doesn't scratch the board, but hard enough where it takes off this underfill stuff. I do have a brush over here. Let's see if it works. I don't know what it's made out of. It's from Tool. How do you pronounce it? Comment down below. Is it Tool, or I don't know. I know the official one is Tool, but if you just say I have a tool, then how does that work? Oh, look at that. Did it work? Oh, maybe this is the tool. I already had it this whole time. Right, let's see. By the way, I do see there's one pad here at the bottom that's not wicked, but you know what, that's fine. Alright, so that's just one chip. Then we have memory chip. Luckily this one doesn't have too much. So, and there's this chunk right here on the side. Chunks on the side. Yeah, that's all the underfill on this chip. That's why it was much easier to remove. And now I'll just prep these pads, wick them flat. Actually, I'm debating should I wick them flat or just leave them prepped, because then it kind of helps with the reball. Actually, not sure if this is gonna work because pads are oxidized. Let me add some more solder paste. Actually, I ran out, so let me use my other solder paste. I like to think of this like that soap you buy that has like feels like sand inside of it, and it's supposed to like exfoliate your skin. I like to think of rubbing this paste like this, like kind of like that, and that it has like these little micro scrubbers essentially. It makes, yeah, like that. Big difference. Okay. And I am going to wick it flat. Try that. If I have any issues, then I could always just not wick it. And since this is a large chip, I can just wick this pretty easily. With my iron. Yeah, this one's pretty much ready to go too. Right. So I think so far, like I've been mentioning, we're in a good spot. I think right now the only possible outcome is if the chips themselves, either one of the two are damaged, then there's no way to get the data anyway. Let me clean this up real good. All right, so this is the memory. You know what, the chip is pretty thick. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fold my little reballing towel one more time. All right, so let's reball this one first. We're doing the BGA 134, which is, oh, this is it. Oops. Oh, this might not be it. Is there another one? Well, let me check on ZXW. Minimize this, maximize this. Yeah, this looks different. All right, let me see if any of the other cutouts here will line up. It's not good. All right, let me check something. All right, so I got another stencil here, which I believe has the right cutout. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I have the wrong stencil. So ignore the beginning of the video where I said which stencil to use. The stencil I'm going to use is by AMAOE, Ammo. I don't know which one it is, but it's the eMMC. This is an eMCP Ammo stencil, and it's the BGA 254 stencil. Let me see, do I have solder paste? Let me dry out the paste, and I do that by pressing down. So lucky I actually had the stencil in stock, otherwise it would ruin my momentum here with the video. Let me move this over. Alright, so one of the tricky parts with reballing like this is that the stencil is 2D and it's easy for it to shift while you're applying the paste and doing the reball process. So you got to be mindful of that. So consider the amount of pressure you're putting from the size and from applying the paste. Alright, so I think I got it covered. So hopefully it didn't move. So where's my other tweezers? Here they are. Oh, there's like lint hairs on it. Am I out of focus? All right. So I can adjust the microscope. All right, so 330 air, kind of just heat in circles. And then try to focus on one corner and see if the balls start forming. There it goes. Just stay on that corner. I don't know if you guys can even see that. Let me activate my polarizer. There we go. I can see that much better. And we're good. All right. Slowly let go and gently push it through. There you have it. So those empty pads, those are the gold pads that were just there on the IC that don't provide any function. So that's why it looks like that. I believe. Did I miss any pads? Oh yeah, I did miss 2 pads here. And let me clean this up and do it one more time. One trick to reballing is if you mess up like that, where there's like a missing pads or something like that, you can just reball one more time on top of the existing solder balls, and it'll just be fine. So let me demonstrate that to you. First, let me clean this up a little bit. All right, so you see the 2 pads here in the center, not center, but there's 2 pads right there that didn't get, it looks like it got stuck to the stencil and it didn't happen. So nice thing is the solder balls themselves kind of hold the stencil in place now. Okay. So you see them right there at the bottom. So really, I just need to apply paste in that section. Everything else I can just scrape off like this. And what happens is we're basically evening out all the pads. And then just the ones that are missing will fill in with paste, the rest will not. Therefore, there's the same amount of volume of solder paste in there. So just kind of reflow it again. And then we'll have 2 extra pads now. Looks like it's taking a little longer. There it goes. There it goes. The balls are now formed. So if you made it this far in the video, say formed balls, if you like. All right, let's poke this through. And there we go. Much better. So before I move on, let me clean this up again. All right, so that's done. see. Solder balls are even all the way across. So this is good. Next is the CPU. And you might ask, how do I know this is CPU? Because it's right next to the NAND or the memory or the eMMC or whatever it's called. Plus, if you look up this device, A71, you'll see it says the CPU is a SM7250. So there you have it. All right, so let me clean off the edges by running my knife down the sides. That way we don't have any random debris. Okay, so my stencil. Okay, so the cap should be like right there on the upper right side. Uh-oh, the cap is going to be in the way. Oh no, look at that. It's actually a cutout for it. Fascinating. Which might be good because it'll essentially hold it in place. Just trying to figure out the alignments. This. Alright, there we go. Oh. Why is it so hard to align? Alright, I think it's aligned there. Alright, it's gonna be tricky. Let me try it. I see the stencil moving. So I'm looking at the pads and the alignment with the stencil, so I can know if the chip underneath has moved. Oh yeah, so this is definitely more than enough paste. Just getting it into every hole is a little tricky. Apply a little more. The way I'm using 183 Celsius paste. So let's see how this goes. If this doesn't work, then I'll change to a lower temp. Remember, we just care about data. So it doesn't have to be reliable, just enough to turn on and back up or connect to the PC really. It's the same process, just heat up the stencil in circles. Alright, so I'm gonna start in this corner. Actually this corner. Okay, so far so good. No warping. I do see some pads are not making contact with the solder balls, which is fine. It's easy to fix. As long as I get most of it good. Alright, so I'm gonna shift this over a little bit. Okay, that's what happened. The stencil shifted and caused some pads not to make contact. So you guys can see on the right side, there's like a silver shining through. Alright, so I shifted the stencil to the left and there we go. Got all the pads soldered on. So I'm going to gently let go. Poke it through ASAP. And let's see, one solder ball is missing. Oh, or just there's one solder ball missing. But I don't see it in the stencil. I think the stencil might be wrong. Let's see. Let me check ZXW. But first, let me clean this. I was glad there's a stencil for this CPU because that I was able to source in the US. Otherwise, I'd have to buy from China, which takes forever. It costs $20-30 to ship. Alright, so if we look at ZXW, and then we want to reverse this because we're looking at the mirror image, and then we want to rotate it to match what I have in front of me. Okay, so it's like this, and essentially in the center of the cap, whatever it is, 1, 2, and 3. So 1, 2, and 3. Where's this one? All right, so let's reference that. There's like a little gap here, and this one, yeah, it is needed. All right, so this is gonna be fun. Gotta basically make my own solder ball. Let's see, what can I do? Actually, I could just take one of these. I think this one might be a good size. Let's try it. So let me put this on the jig. Where'd it go? Switch views as well. Right, so I have that little, I think yeah, this is way too small. Let me do this. Let me place it so at least there's some solder there. Essentially, I'm going to hold it over the pad. Oh, I'm burning my finger. Okay, I got some solder there. Just maybe keep adding until it looks visually close. So there's another piece right here, which we can then do the same thing. Actually, this one might be too big. Let me do this. Let me find another a smaller one. Thing is, I don't have the solder balls next to me to reference. I could also kind of form my own using the stencil, but that's kind of tricky. That looks too big. Okay. Like a little piece of, oops, I'm out of view. Oops, wrong pad. Add some flux. You know what? I think I screwed up because I got that other pad. But maybe no, it doesn't look too big. For some reason, I was somewhere off over here. I think this little piece here might be what we need to finish this pad, which is right here. Gotta be careful. All right, so I think that should work, hopefully. Let me clean this up. Yeah, you can't even tell the difference. It looks a little bigger. What I can do also is, so this one right here, use my blade and shave off a piece. And shave off a little more. I should have reduced the volume of solder. All right, so one thing I thought about is if this cap or whatever it is, it has some solder on top of it. And if that solder is too high, too tall, what's gonna happen is it's gonna kind of lift the chip. So I'm gonna try to wick away that little solder pad that's on top. So it's as flat as possible. All right, so this looks good. I'm going to actually I need this. So donor board, receiver board, whatever you want to call it. And then, oh man, stuck to my tweezer. They need to reflow this. There's also some crud right here. Uh-oh. That's not good. I don't know what that is. Alright, let me do this first. Put a blob of flux. Hopefully this pad over here will just go back into place. I want the flux to flow to the other side of the board, to the IC. Let me just add it myself because it's like sticking to one side of the chip. It doesn't want to coat the left side. So what I'm gonna do here is actually just reflowing it so all the pads are centered, all the solder balls are centered, nice and even. That solder ball was reformed over here, so we're back to business. Okay, so now we go back to over here. Back to this. Let's look at this. That doesn't look good. Let me fix that too then. Alright, so I don't know what happened here. I think it just needs a reflow. Not sure how that got like that. Okay, install the board back into the holder. So I'm gonna do one at a time, so let me move this out of the way. Alright, this is a stressful part. Alright, that's all clean, so the cap will sit there. Alright, so what I've done, what I've seen in the past, and it's worked for me, is using rosin to put a coat of essentially flux, but it's very, oops. It's like a thin layer of flux, so don't breathe this in. Alright, so I got a little bit over here, so I'm debating what I should do. Yeah, that's not good. Well, let's just try it. Alright, so I'm going to use my 330 reballing temperature and see what I can do. And just try to hold it in place. warm up board. There's like a little marker over here that kind of tells you the position, and there's one on each corner. I think if you're within those lines, it should be good. Just heat it. So I'm gonna bump it. They're still not installed. I'm gonna bump this up a little bit to maybe 50 air. And let me bump it. I touched it and I don't see the chip move. Let me bump up maybe 345. Since there's no underfill anymore, and then we use 183 Celsius paste, this should install a lot easier than it was to remove. So that's why I'm lower temp. Yeah, this is still too solid. Let me do my usual 365 and 65 air. It's crazy, still nothing. Oh, I see some flux kind of moving out the bottom. Alright, it's getting there. Maybe we just need a little bit more airflow. There it goes. There we go. Still not enough. Let's do 380. So 380 and 80. Feels like it feels like it's at that, like right below the threshold. I'm just bumping it to see if all the solder has melted. I think that's... Alright, let me just hit it with 2 seconds of my 480 setting. Alright, let's see. Yeah, definitely installed now. And then this one I can just use regular flux. The pads are bigger, they're a little more spread apart. So this part shouldn't be an issue. And then you can just look at the pattern of the pads and see how they go. Like a hair. Like that hair will burn away. Alright, so same thing, let's start off low. Alright, let me line it up with the little notches in the corner, little gold arrows. Look at that. So thermal mass for this one is a lot smaller than the CPU. I can't bump it, so let me bump up the air. This should flow the chip and allow me to bump it, and then I know it's installed good. There it goes. Alright. Alright, cool. Now let's test this out. Okay, so we have the board here. We do the transplant on. Let's pop it into the housing. Now I don't have a DC power supply adapter to plug this in to see the power consumption. So we're just gonna plug it in and just see if it works. So I know the battery is charged on this, so let me push power. Oh, look at that. Look at that, we have the boot logo. Now, important part is that it boots to the home screen, touch works, and I can connect it to the computer, which I do have cable over here. This is a USB-C Android device. So let's see if this works. Looks promising, although it feels like it's on here for a while now. Oh, look at that. Ooh, it's gonna have sound. Awesome. All right. Here we go. This is the old board. Look at that. Starting Android. And there we go. Now look at that. All right, now let's plug it into the computer. Let's see, how do we get the USB communication? All right, we don't want tethering. We're transferring files, yeah. So let me, oh yeah, here we go. There we go. We're connected. Oh, they're empty. Let me see, let me unplug it. Plug it back in. There it goes. Setting up. Allow access to data. Look at that. We got the data. Awesome. The DCIM. Here's all the pictures. Yeah, there it goes. So I'm not gonna show you guys the. Here, let me change it to list view. Yeah, so there you go. All data is here. Successful CPU swap. Man, that's awesome. So next step for me is to just copy over everything in my computer, zip it up, put it on Google Drive, and then invoice the customer for the job. Once they pay, I'll email them the link to download all the data, and we're good to go. I will also send the phone back so that it's functional in case they need anything else that they didn't get. They have the data here as well. But yeah, I'm trying not to curse of excitement, but it's really, that was my first Samsung CPU swap. I've done one other CPU swap. That was on an iPhone 7 Plus, which I still kind of have here. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So one thing I learned is that, the Samsung Android phones, a lot of them are just single stack CPU. So instead of like iPhones where it's like the CPU and the RAM sandwiched together, that complicates things because if you damage the RAM, you can cause problems where the phone doesn't boot anymore because of that. But this one's is a single chip, and it's pretty simple. So I hope you guys learned something from that video. It was definitely a learning process for me too. I mixed up the stencils, and it was tricky to clean the underfill and all that, but here we are, successful job. So if you guys need data recovery, send me a message, link down below in the description on how to contact me. I do data recovery for Androids, iPhones, iPads. Just let me know, I'll send you a quote. And I offer melon repairs as well, so micro soldering and all that. So thanks a lot for watching. Make sure you smash that like button if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to the channel to see more like this, and share this video with all your friends. So don't forget also some t-shirts and all the tools I used today in the video description down below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.